What are the most important games for the Minnesota Vikings in 2025? Now, conventional wisdom will say, hey, the last two games against the Lions and Packers will be the most important. But who's to say that those have any stakes other than their division rival? So I took a little bit of a different approach on what the most important games are. And so did Dave. We're going to have a nice conversation about it because it's the offseason and there's only so much J.J. McCarthy we can talk about before we're just repeating ourselves. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show, sponsored by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. My name is Tyler Forness. With me, as always, in the top left corner is producer Dave. Dave, I have a take for you that was just brought to my attention. It's a comparison, and this may go over your head because I have no idea how much you know basketball. But somebody just compared Michael Penix Jr. to Kyle Corver, and I think that might be one of the greatest comparisons I've ever heard in my life. Do you know who Kyle Corver is?
I do not.
So Corver was a star at Creighton in the mid-2000s and just an elite three-point shooter. Arguably one of the best three-point shooters of all time in the NBA even. But that's pretty much all he did. He was just a straight shooter, a hooper. And that's kind of how Michael Penix throws the football. He just wants to throw deep bombs all the time. And I think it's a really good comparison. Shout out to Fault for that one. I just thought that was interesting. And I bring that up because we're going to have a conversation about that game in particular as well later on in this show, because we're going to break down the most important games for the Minnesota Vikings in this upcoming season. And what's really important about understanding the most important games, Dave, is it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the games with the highest stakes. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the games that decide the division. It's important from a multitude of different factors. And it's kind of an ambiguous process to put this together, because you could convince yourself that this factor matters when picking this game, but it doesn't matter when picking that game. And I think that in itself is a very interesting talking point. And considering that we're in a position where it's the doldrums of the offseason, there's not a whole lot to talk about. We're not just going to keep saying the same 5 things about J.J. McCarthy that we talked about since January. It's cool to look at things from a different perspective, which is what we're going to do here tonight. And I'm really excited about it. But I want to start off with a little bit of Jalen Ramsey discussion because we can finally put it to bed. Minnesota Vikings will not be making that trade. We talked extensively about the Jalen Ramsey idea because the idea itself made a lot of sense for multiple reasons. And understanding the cap ramifications, I thought that was a really good episode, an important episode for just identifying how things work with the Vikings and how they've tried to structure their contracts and how they're trying to maximize the salary cap space that they have during this time where J.J. McCarthy is on a rookie contract. So from that perspective, I do think so. Angel asked if I'm attending any preseason games or functions. Well, one of the preseason games is my brother's wedding, so I will not be attending the game against the Patriots. But
we got the joint practices then.
I'm hoping to be at all 12 Vikings practices. No guarantees that I'll be at all 12. It's for me, like, it's not like a 10-minute drive. It's an hour drive. And then coming back, especially with the insane traffic on 494 with the just gross construction, it's going to be a challenge for me to be at every practice. So we'll see kind of what that looks like, but I'd like to be at as many as possible. So,
okay. Well, that's great. Biggs asked the question early on, are we live?
Yeah, of course. We're live every Monday and Thursday night.
And the key to find out whether we're live or not, Biggs, besides us calling you out and giving you a shout out, is if you see the remarks popping up on screen that are coming from the chat, we are live. And we try to be live for every show. Some of them don't quite make it. We got a pre-record, but this one's live. Because we wanted to talk to you about the schedule. And first, we all heard the news today. Jalen Ramsey was traded to the Steelers. And what was all involved in that trade?
Oh, my gosh. Waking up and seeing that Ramsey was traded was not a surprise. Seeing that he went to the Steelers was a huge surprise. And then seeing that the Steelers sent back Minkah Fitzpatrick in a 1-to-1 swap was just insane. The Vikings could not have matched that. They just couldn't have. Like, even if they wanted to trade Byron Murphy Jr., no, they weren't going to be able to match that. And it was really interesting because like Minkah kind of had a poor back end of the year, but he's still like a multi-time All-Pro. And he's also going to the team that traded him. And theoretically, it was more of a, hey, I don't like Brian Flores kind of thing. That's kind of how I viewed the end of his tenure in Miami. But I also think it's really interesting that they made that trade. And then you have Jonnu Smith, and there was a pick swap in there. The Steelers get a 7th with Jonnu Smith, and they send a 5th. So it's interesting from that standpoint. And I'm fascinated to kind of see what comes from this on an overall scale down the line. But the Vikings essentially told us when Brian Flores took the podium at mandatory minicamp, talking about Isaiah Rodgers, they were going to make this move. And one thing I've noticed listening to this coaching staff longer and longer is when things happen down the line, you can link back to something that they said earlier on in the offseason or the season. That's like, okay, this makes complete sense now. Complete sense. Because you have a guy in Brian Flores who just straight up said, we believe in Isaiah Rodgers. I've liked him since he played at UMass. And there are only three types of people that watch UMass football. The fans of UMass or their opposing team, scouts, and degenerates like me. Those are the only people watching UMass football, especially if it's UMass versus UConn. That is the true sicko game. And if you know, you know. But it's interesting to kind of look at it from that perspective because, well, now it makes complete sense why he said that. They didn't want to make a move. And they didn't. This is a very interesting position that they have. They believe that they're going to be just fine at corner. Are they right or are they wrong? I don't know. We'll find out. But they're willing to make that bet. They're willing to lie in that bed. Last year, they came in a better spot than they are right now. But then, unfortunately, there was the tragic passing of Kyrie Jackson. And then the first day of training camp, Mekhi Blackmon tears his ACL. So all of a sudden, you went from this potentially being like an high upside strength of your team to, okay, things are cratering. We need to do something in a kind of a desperate move. And that's how Stephon Gilmore ended up here. So I'm really interested to see how the cornerback position will play out. And I know everybody else is, but it really shouldn't be a surprise that they didn't make the deal for Ramsey because they kind of told us, nope, we're good.
Plus, he's old.
Yeah.
Not that
the money factor
age matters. Harrison Smith, may you play at your top form. But, as we discussed yesterday on Two Old Bloggers, there's an age limit for players. And at corner, being 31, you are quickly ascending towards that hill.
Mm-hmm.
Down it. Fast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because Ramsey in Pittsburgh is going to play star, which if you don't know what the star position is, it's like a nickel safety hybrid. You're going to play a lot in the slot. You're going to do some drop stuff. It's basically the Josh Metellus role without playing any linebacker. That's kind of what star is. So they're already moving him from like being a standard outside corner, but they already have two really good outside corners in Joey Porter Jr. and Darius Slay. And Slay is also older than Ramsey. The Steelers are just a bunch of uncles. It's so funny. Like, you know what the Steelers remind me of, Dave? Peak Al Davis Raiders in the 2000s, where they would just sign everybody who was old because they were once really, really good at football. And it did result in an MVP for Rich Gannon. And not only that, but they made a Super Bowl. But the Bucs were just a house. And Rich Gannon, I think, threw 4 or 5 interceptions, including 2 pick sixes. It was 5. 2 pick sixes to Dwight Smith, and then another one to Derek Brooks. All of them, I think, came in the fourth quarter. Just a weird-ass Super Bowl. But the Steelers are in an interesting spot. But we are not a Steelers show. We're a Vikings-centric show. So I want to kind of dive into our main topic for the night, which is the most important games. And I wanted to have this discussion later on and not right after the schedule came out, because there's so much schedule content. It can get lost in the shuffle. And I think this is a really important type of discussion. And I'm really intrigued to kind of see how this will end up looking long term. I'm interested to see how this will change going into the season. And I think this is a really fascinating discussion, but I want to start here, Dave. I kind of looked at it from a lot of different perspectives, and I didn't use the same criteria to judge each game because each game is so different in placement on the schedule and where the game is located and the different matchups throughout it. So it's a little bit different from that perspective, and that's kind of how I approached it, where I looked at each game on an individual level and decided, okay, is this game more important than this game or what? But how did you approach it when having some of these conversations in your head?
Well, when you first asked me, I said, in descending order, number 5, the game that secures the Vikings win the division is the 5th most important. Number 4, winning the game that secures the number 1 seed and or winning the wild card weekend. Number 3, winning the divisional round of the playoffs. Number 2, winning the conference. And of course, number 1, winning the Super Bowl. And what was your reaction?
Oh, I got to pull up the text because my response was very funny. I said, those are hypotheticals, though.
But like, and it's just like Coach Madden. To win the game, you need to score more points than the opponent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's to me, and I completely understand the idea of like those are your most important games, but the way we look at the schedule right now, which is why I didn't go that route, none of those games are a thing right now. There is no guarantee that you're going to play for the division title. There's no guarantee you're going to play in the playoffs. And obviously, in a vacuum, if you have those games, those are going to be your most important games. Sure, I completely agree. But Chris Thompson says the most important game is the next one. The most important beer is the next one, too. I agree.
Well, the most important game is to win one. Win the first one. And that's sort of where I went. I went down. The obvious answer is all the division games. You got to win the division. That is those. Now, which one of those division games, that's where I placed them in a specific order.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of took a little bit of a different approach because of all of these, you want to win every game. But the way I built this is significantly less about wins and more about the why, the performance. Only a couple of them I have on here because I'm like, okay, you really need to get this win, and it's for a very specific reason. So we'll start here. My number 5 game is Week 16 at the New York Giants. This is, to me, this has super trap game written all over it. It's the only cold weather game on the schedule, unless you count the Seahawks at the end of November, which it's Seattle. I mean, it could be kind of cold, but it's probably going to be like 55 with a little bit of rain. But this is the only like actual northern cold weather game on the regular season schedule. It's sandwiched in between. On one side, you have the Commanders at home and then the Cowboys on the road in prime time. And then after that, 4 days later, you have the Lions on Christmas Day at home, and then you play the Packers at home. It's a trap game. This is one where you cannot overlook the Giants, who objectively do look like a better team on paper. They have a really good defensive front, but you need to come out of this game with a win, especially if you want those last 2 games to potentially matter. And that's a hypothetical in itself. But this is easily a game where a team could be looking ahead and have just had a couple grueling matchups. And all of a sudden, you have a game on Christmas Day in 4 days against the Lions that could decide the division. Do not, and I repeat, do not look past the New York Football Giants. That one scares me a lot because all of a sudden, Dave, you are looking at like, okay, you lose to the Giants. Well, maybe now you need the Lions and Packers to lose both games to potentially win the division. Like, there's so many things that could go wrong because of a loss there. And you especially want to have momentum going into the playoffs if you're going to get there. I think that game is going to be so crucial in this schedule. And it's easily one that even the most veteran of team and coaches could potentially look past. And to me, that's worrisome. I'm concerned that it could be a problem. Will it be? I'm not going to tell you that either. That would be gaslighting. But it could be. And to me, that's a scary proposition. To have a game that should be an easy dub, all of a sudden be one of your tougher games because of where it's on the schedule and outside factors like weather potentially playing a really big factor.
Whereas I've got as I'm not going least important. I didn't rank them least and most. But the first one is the biggie for me. At the Bears, Monday Night Football. We're going to see J.J. McCarthy in Chicago, his home, and see how he debuts. If he comes out firing, hitting all cylinders, and that means Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, if Jordan Addison isn't suspended, T.J. Hawkinson, and whoever else, and they come out and win that first game, it's going to be important to get that under their belt, that first win, and to have it against a division opponent is a bonus.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about that game a little more in a little bit because I do have that game on my list. But I'm going to go to my next one. My number 4 game is Week 7 against the Philadelphia Eagles. This is going to be a very, very critical game for a couple of reasons. One, coming out of the bye, you better be ready. Last year, they were ready, and they played one hell of a game against the Detroit Lions. They arguably played the Lions better than any team who lost to them all season long. They were in the game. They came back from down 2 scores. They held the lead late in the fourth quarter. And they were about 6 inches away from being able to seal that game. But Sam Darnold was just barely off target trying to hit Justin Jefferson. And when you come off of a bye, it's really important to get all your ducks in a row. Plus, the Eagles are defending Super Bowl champions. If you want a shot at that number 1 seed, you're going to have to make sure you're past them and you have a chance to beat them. Because if you beat them, it's essentially like having a 2-game lead. Because not only will you win the tiebreaker if you're ahead of them, if you're tied, you'll get it too. So it's big from that standpoint. Plus, you have a Thursday night game the following Thursday. So
which is on my list.
You're going to play 4 days later at the Los Angeles Chargers. And this is a game you also cannot overlook from that standpoint. I don't think they're going to overlook the Super Bowl champions. But it's one that I think you have to have if you're the Vikings. And I do think that I trust them to get it. I trust them to be able to do some of those things. And I'm really excited to see what this game looks like from an on-field perspective, especially after what it was 2023 when Brian Flores just invited the Eagles to run. They're like, Jalen Hurts, we're not letting you throw the ball deep and beat us there. And then DeAndre Swift ran for almost 200 yards, and the Eagles got the win. I think it was like 34-28. But this is a different Eagles team. They have Saquon Barkley. You don't want to just let Saquon run. So how are you going to play it? I think this is going to be a really, really important game for the Vikings to get a win if they want any sense of trying to make a Super Bowl run. Plus, this is arguably going to be their biggest test all year. The first 5 games, the biggest test is the Bengals. And I'm not saying that to like dismiss the Bengals. Very good football team. But if that's your biggest test, considering all the problems they have on defense, yeah, you really want to use this as a litmus test, a measuring stick for your team. And that's where I think this game can be really, really important from that standpoint as well.
Well, I believe you're correct about the Eagles. I believe coming out of the bye, they will be ready and the players will be pumped up to play because they're the Super Bowl champions. Anytime you play the Super Bowl champions, the team will be up for that game. Now, what I thought was the next game, the short week, suddenly having to fly to L.A. to play Thursday night. Now, you can look at it, 2 ways. It's not a noon game. It's an evening game, but it's a little bit earlier than, it's 2 hours earlier than would be in the central time zone because you're out on the West Coast. But coming off that, what would be an emotional high of playing the Eagles, whether win or lose, and hopefully they win, but especially if they win, are they due for a letdown against San Diego, against Los Angeles, the Chargers? It's going to be interesting. I'm curious. That one to me is an important game because we're going to find out. Is J.J. McCarthy going to star? And yes, we're going to talk about J.J. McCarthy because the season, he's the quarterback. It revolves around him. And is he going to come out firing for his college head coach? Or is he going to come out, flat because we just played the Eagles?
Yeah.
That one, if he comes out, if we go back to back after the bye with the wins, that's something.
It's going to be really interesting. I didn't have that game on my list because for a few reasons. I think that game, because it's a Thursday night game, I kind of just chalk that one up to, okay, this is random. If you win, you win. If you lose, you lose, especially because it's against a relatively similar opponent as far as overall skill. You put that game on short rest, and I kind of, for lack of a better term, throw it out the window. Weird things happen on Thursday nights. Very weird things. Christian Darrisaw had his knee blown out on a simple draw play on a Thursday night. Like, weird things happen. So I think you make some really good points. But for how I constructed my list, I'm like, I kind of looked over that game for some of the reasons that I just mentioned. But I do think that you make some really good points. And I completely understand adding it to your list, especially at a spot like number 4. Couple
Thank you,
things from.
T-Bass.
No, thank you. I will gladly do that. Dave doesn't even have to wait. He's already having a drink.
Doing it. Yeah.
My wife and I have started to go to trivia every week. We won last week. Team Dos Fornos, baby. And we're basically getting our dinner for free tomorrow because we won, which rocks. Couple questions. Freddie asks if we're going to lead the league in blitz again. So blitzing with this Minnesota Vikings team is a number that you really can't take super seriously. And it's an interesting conversation because the way I view it is the Vikings believe 5 is their base pass rush. That's how they ran their defense last year. 5 is considered a blitz. So I don't have the ability to access the fully detailed data that says, hey, 6 or more rushers. So because of that, I view blitzing a little bit differently. But in the traditional sense of, hey, this team blitzes more than any other, I think they'll finish top 3 for sure. But the way Brian Flores views blitzing versus the way it's constructively used throughout the league as like an agreed upon what is a blitz, I think they will be at the top. So I do find that element very interesting in conversational purposes. Stuff like having talks about it on this show, because they don't blitz. They don't blitz like other teams. They just send 5. I actually don't know Starsky and Hutch's captain's name. I know a lot of things, but I never watched Starsky and Hutch. That's one of those many movies that
before your time. And I'm not talking a movie, the TV series.
Dave, that is not a good argument. I have seen a lot of old television shows. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with Game Show Network. Match Game was my favorite. I loved Match Game. My mom was obsessed with What's My Line. I've seen almost every episode of What's My Line. I've watched like Leave It to Beaver, Petticoat Junction, Adam 12, the old cheesy cop show. I've seen a bunch of Dragnet. Like, I've watched a ton of old TV in my life. So unfortunately, that's not even a good excuse. That's just one that has escaped me. But
Ken says the answer is Dobie.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. My number 3 game is one that you already talked about, Dave, and that is week 1 against Chicago Bears. And it's very simple. It's week 1. The Vikings are 1-3 in season opening games on Monday Night Football. Their only win was 2006 against the Washington Commanders. And, the Munsters address. Oh, I should know this. But you got some good questions. If it were Trivia Mafia putting them on, we'd be 0 for 2 right now. My wife wouldn't have known either of those. She's brilliant. She's got a doctorate, but general knowledge like that from an old school trivia standpoint is not her forte. But that's why we balance each other well. So the Bears, I think J.J. McCarthy coming out and just showing that the moment is not too big for him. And because the Vikings have QB-proofed this team. McCarthy, just play quarterback. Play quarterback like it's 2022 Michigan. Not 23 when they won the Natty. 2022, when they basically didn't ask you to do anything. And just learn, get comfortable, and as you continue to grow and get comfortable, we will put more on your plate. They don't have to have him do a lot of things. And I think that's a really interesting strategy. I think it's also a really smart one. Don't bite off more than you can chew, and don't put more on your plate than you're ready to eat. And I think McCarthy's going to be ready for more than the Vikings give him initially, which is smart. Spoon feed him to a point. Get him comfortable. As he shows he's ready for more, give him more. But don't force it. A little thing could absolutely ruin a quarterback. You just don't know until you really see him on the field. I believe McCarthy's going to be good, but we want them to take the step forward. Josh, I stand corrected. Good call. So that is the other one. I know they lost the game in the 80s on Monday Night Football. They lost to the 49ers on Monday Night Football in 2015. So yeah, I suppose that I think I just goofed in my brain, which, hey, let's be real, I do that a decent amount. But yeah, Chicago Bears number 3, Dave. I think that game is going to be really, really important.
Yep. And I hope it's the start of the demise of Ben Johnson as a head coach. You got to remember, he's unproven as a head coach. He's never been.
Mm-hmm.
Some coordinators that are great coordinators come in and are just absolutely swamped with, oh my God, what is all this? And I hope he's one of them. I hope Brian Flores makes him one of them.
Bingo. What's your number 3 game, Dave?
Number 3 game is Week 9, the gut check against the NFC North champions. It's the game with the Lions, and we will be playing them. Whether or not they're playing well, this one is important because we lost 2 games to the Lions last season.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is going to be important to KOC, Brian Flores, and the team that was playing last year, that they go in and get revenge.
Yes. This is actually, Dave, my number 2 game. This game. And it's interesting because you think, oh, the Vikings are coming off a Thursday night game. They're going to have more rest than the Lions. No, the Lions have a week 8 bye. So they're going to be on 14 days rest. The Vikings will be on 10 days rest. But it's going to be huge that the Vikings go in and put in a good showing. And this could be one of the things that flips the script on what the NFC North is going to be. And I think it's really important that they get a win. Or if they don't get a win, they lose by like a last-second field goal like they did in the first matchup last year. Showing up is going to be huge in this game. And it's going to be McCarthy's first big-time divisional matchup. Now, they are facing the division opponent in week 1, but then they don't face another one until the Detroit Lions in week 9. So I think it's going to be really, really important for them to come out and get the win. It's going to be important for them just to show up. Showing up is going to be really important in a lot of these games, but this one especially, because you don't want to put yourself at a disadvantage moving forward in the division, especially if you end up losing that opener against the Bears, which, as Freddie mentioned earlier in the chat, the Vikings are a 1-point underdog, but that's not too big of a surprise because they have the Bears with almost even a win total odds as the Vikings. I think that's asinine, but Vegas is very high on the Bears. They're low on the Vikings, and that low is because of J.J. McCarthy.
And of course, it's at Chicago. So,
and we all know how things go at Soldier Field. But yeah, I think that week 9 game is going to be a really, really pivotal one. That's why I have it at number 2, Dave. What's your number 2?
I'm sticking inside the division for this one. It's week 12 at the Packers. Why? Because this will be the 3rd victory in a row over the Packers. And it will put, hopefully, a nail in the coffin about the Packers being so good because they got Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur. I want to bury them. And it's this burying in week 12 that I look forward to, and that's why I have this game as one of my 5 important ones.
Dave, try talking again. You cut out at the end.
Did I?
Your mic. Okay, you're back now. I missed. What game were you talking about?
The Week 12 at the Packers. And I did that. Your internet went wonky.
That might be what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I did get some Wi-Fi extenders from Spectrum, so hopefully that ends up helping.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. But yeah, that Week 12 game is going to be really interesting. And if you can get wins in either of those first two games on the road, just remember, if I recall correctly, the first 3 divisional games for the Vikings are all on the road. Nope. 3 of the first 4 is the week before the Vikings host the Bears. But getting a win at Green Bay, which we have done the last 2 years, would be really, really huge in continuing that momentum. Heck, the Vikings have won 3 of the last 4 against Green Bay. Heck yeah. My number 1 is going to be a really interesting one. And one, Dave, I don't think you'd be able to guess if I gave you 3 guesses. Week 2 against the Atlanta Falcons is number 1.
Really?
So here's why I have it at number 1. The Bears game on Monday Night Football. Yeah, it's a Monday night game, but it's also week 1 and it's at Soldier Field. Weird things happen. You're going to have things that are just weird. And you're getting all these butterflies out, these kinks out. This is your first ever NFL start. Okay. Whatever ends up happening in week 1, like, we cannot read too much into it. And the national media,
everybody overreacts to week 1, including
the national media will form their opinion on J.J. McCarthy after week 1. Nothing else will matter. So week 2 to me is when we're really going to start to see McCarthy. It's also going to be really important because with how the Vikings fan base believes in J.J. McCarthy and how they talk about McCarthy, he better perform at home, buddy. He better show up and he better play well, because I'm not going to say the fan base is going to turn on him, but if he goes out and has a couple stinkers, there's going to be some people panicking. There's going to be some freaking out within the fan base. You have a chance to go into US Bank Stadium and play. Just play good football. And I think McCarthy can do that. It's also going to be important because Michael Penix Jr. is going to be on the other side. One of his contemporaries from the 2024 NFL Draft. Penix went 8th. McCarthy went 10th. It's also a Sunday Night Football game. So your first 2 games ever are going to be on national television. That's not ideal for a first-year starter. Or first-time starter.
Hey,
but
he loves pressure. He's already said it.
Oh, yeah. It still doesn't mean that if there's pressure or no pressure, that you take pressure. Like, you'd ideally like to have little pressure for those first couple starts to get your feet wet. He doesn't have that luxury here. He's got to show that he's the guy. And I think he will. I'm very intrigued to see what he does, how he looks. And this could be a really, really crucial game for the Minnesota Vikings. I'm very intrigued to see what he does and how he does it. Dave, this is going to be, I think, like right now, this is the this is one of the biggest ones for the Vikings. That's why I have it at 1. I think it's going to be really important for McCarthy to get off on a right foot after your first game at home. And then the next week, you got the Bengals. You better be ready. That Bengals team, as we kind of talked about earlier, they're a good football team. It's really going to be your only major challenge, per se, in those first 5 weeks. You better be ready for Joe Burrow in that offense. And if McCarthy is performing well and he's on the right track, I think you're in a really good spot.
Yep. Now my last one, I had week 17 and 18 down because it's going to determine the division, most likely. And week 17 being on Christmas Day is going to be special anyways, and let's beat the Lions. But the other one I have is a combination. It's week 4 and 5, where we're overseas in Dublin and London. We have never lost an overseas game. Now, the competition level, whether it be in Dublin against the Steelers in their geriatric home, we should win there. But then we have the Browns, and they have all their issues. We should win there. It is important that we come out from overseas still remaining undefeated, in my opinion, for overseas schedules. Pick up wins in week 4 and 5, and then come back.
Yeah. Dave, I think this was fun. This is a good exercise to kind of look at things from a different perspective. Let's run down our list one more time, and then we'll get the people out of here. My number 5 was week 16 at the New York Giants. 4, week 7 against the Philadelphia Eagles at home. Week 3 week 1 at the Chicago Bears. Number 2, week 9 at the Detroit Lions. And number 1, week 2 at home against the Atlanta Falcons. And of those games, only one of them was on prime time, which would not have been the case years ago when it was Kirk Cousins taking the spot at quarterback. Those would have always been, are we going to get primetime Kirk?
Yeah, it was always a big story. And Dalton says neither one of us picked Seattle.
I think Seattle is it's big in the sense that you're facing Sam Darnold. I don't think it's big other than that. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
Oh, it is. Mine, in no particular order, was week 1. J.J. McCarthy needs to set the table, basically, from there on. Then comes the gut check, week 9 against the Lions, followed by the short week of the Chargers following the Eagles game. Then I concluded with beating the Packers once again. Or did I? No, I didn't. Yes, Packers and Lambeau for the 3rd time. And then also looked at the overseas games that we've got to come away with wins on those. We do that, I think we're doing pretty good. Then, of course, it'll all finish up week 17 on Christmas, and week 18 hopefully will mean nothing, and we'll be resting our starters because we got the number 1 seed.
I hope so. Dave. But this is going to be interesting to kind of see how things play out. And what's also interesting is we'll be back on Thursday. Don't forget, we are now a Monday and Thursday show. No more Wednesday, which means I get to watch Dynamite, and you will have a cool lead-in for every Thursday night game this upcoming season. And we're also going to have the NFC North show, who will be King. Dave is on every single week, and sometimes it airs on this network. The other times it airs on the other networks within Fans First Sports Network podcast partner.
Yeah, and this week it should be on the Frustrated Chicago Sports Fans Network. Should be Wednesday at 4:00 Central is the normal time, but it does move on occasion due to the participants having to work or travel.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's also important here is every single one of those who will be kings is on our podcast feed, which is why we always ask, hey, subscribe to both the YouTube channel and the podcast feed, because sometimes I'll just sit down and throw out a podcast and we won't throw it on YouTube because there's just something I want to talk about and I just get bored and I'll just sit and talk for however long I want to talk. That's the nice part about having this.
Ken Sal is taking basically the summer off. I sent her a message today saying she was being missed, and she said he's not saying that. I said he wouldn't have asked me the question of where he was unless she was missed. So let her know. Message her on X or Facebook or wherever that she is being missed. We need her back.
Yeah, I agree. And that's going to be the show. We'll be back on Thursday night leading into 4th of July weekend. And it should be a fun weekend as the 4th is on a Friday. And it's a big deal out here in Delano. There's the celebration in town, the carnival, and we'll be out there quite a bit for that. And until then, we'll see you Thursday. Like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. SKOL Vikings, everybody.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!